Hey guys, this is Carrie, and in this video we're going to be adding functionality to our responder robot. So let's go into Replit, and let's open up the Replit from last class. I have to go there, and then robot responder. So I like to work with my two screens side by side, so I'm going to pop out this screen and pull it to the side here. And now I'm ready to program. So we got up to this place where we designed the interface yesterday. And now what we need to do is we need to actually add functionality to each of the buttons. To give myself some more room to program, I'm just going to get rid of the little window because I don't need that anymore. All right, so we're going to be working mostly today in the JavaScript file. So before we can work in the JavaScript file, we want to add functionality to each of these buttons. So we need a way of selecting each of these buttons individually. So there's an attribute very similar to a class, but classes can apply to multiple elements. This attribute is called the ID, and it's a unique identifier, and you can only give the one ID to one element. So let's put ID equals amazing here. I'm going to give this one an ID of best. And you can give your next two buttons similar IDs, and these should all be different words. If you want to give a two-word ID, what you can do is you can use something called Camelcase here, where you combine the first word and the second word into one word with no space, but you make the second word capitalized. It's called Camelcase because it looks like the bumps on a camel's back. Killin' bump it because it's capitalized. And that's a technical word you'll see in programming textbooks, even though it sounds like something I made up. So now I've given each of my buttons an ID. I'm ready to start interacting with these buttons. So similar to CSS, where we had to select the thing that we wanted to style and then apply the styles, in JavaScript we're going to have to select the things that we want to add functionality to and then add functionality. So I'm going to be leaving throughout my code green comments. Comments are code that doesn't actually run. So any line that starts with // is for you guys or for me to help me remind myself of why I was writing the code below. Select the buttons on the page. So this will be a similar design pattern that we use throughout the year. We're going to select these things, the things on the page that we're interacting with, so that we can interact with them. So I've made this JavaScript toolbox, which contains all of our tools, and you're going to have a link to it. So for selecting an element, you're going to want to use this line of code right here. So you can copy and paste it. Let me zoom back out so we can see that as a single line of code. So let variable name equal document.querySelector CSS Selector. So the things we're going to fill in here are the CSS selector and the variable name. So I want to select the first button. So the first button had an ID of amazing. Now for IDs, it's kind of like classes, but instead of putting a dot like we did when we were styling classes or selecting classes, to select an ID, we put a hashtag. So let's take the hashtag amazing button. Query selector is another way of saying we're selecting it. And then the name of this, let's call this amazing. So inside of the code word amazing, we're going to store this button. And the way we selected this button was using the ID that we wrote here. So the next ID is best. I'm going to select that one. Let best equal. And you can write these lines of code or you can copy them from the toolbox. I guess I forgot to use the toolbox because it's kind of familiar to do this process. But you could have just gone to the toolbox, copied and pasted, and then changed best and best. All right, so the next thing that you're going to do is you have to finish this by selecting the other two buttons. All right, so you're gonna have a couple more lines of code there when you're done with all the selection. They'll look very similar. You'll have 2 more lines of code if you have 2 more buttons. All right, so to add functionality, now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna leave a comment, add functionality. So whenever something happens on the page, someone clicks something or someone types on the keyboard something, these are events on the web page. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, amazing button, which we're calling amazing. Listen for a click event. And this is the final tool in our toolbox. So the most important thing here is that when you create the event listener, you have to go, oh man, my mouse is struggling here, all the way from line 14 to line 17, and do a Command C and then a Command V. And the things we're going to fill in here is we're going to say the element that's going to be listening is the amazing button. We're calling that amazing. So take amazing, we're going to add an event listener to it. The type of event it's going to be listening for is a click event. Make sure your click is lowercase because we're listening for a lowercase click event. Just like most things in JavaScript, add event listener, query selector, document, click is lowercase. And then what we write here is we write the function that we want to run when this is clicked. In this case, the only thing we want to do is we want to alert out, you did an amazing job. And I'll put an emoji there. You can put the emoji using the emoji keyboard. All right, so you did an amazing job. All right, let's see what happens. So we'll refresh it. And now when we click amazing job, that triggers this event listener and it gives us the pop-up because we have an alert as our procedure. You did an amazing job. If we want to alert out something else, as everything that we put in here will run as a function when we click it. So let's see, alert out, blah. And so the way that you set up this function is everything from here to here in the curly parentheses, kind of like our styles for CSS. These are lines of code that are going to run when the trigger event clicking happens to amazing. All right, let's see what happens. Amazing job. Blah. Awesome. I don't really want to say blah though, so I'm going to delete this line of code. All right. I would also like to add an event listener to this. So we have to create another event listener. So we can go to the toolbox. We can copy that whole line of code from 17 to 14. Make sure that you get these last 2 parenthesis things with it, because that's setting up the whole function from this curly parenthesis to this one. All right, now this time, I'm going to be using the best element. The best element, we want to add an event listener to it. It's listening for a click event. And the function that it's going to run is it's going to run alert out, you are the best. And let's see, smiley face emoji. All right, so now if we refresh this, we've put an event listener on this one. You are the best. Amazing job. So what we're going to be working with this page, or working with this year, is there's many different kinds of events. Sometimes we'll click the page and it will respond. Other times we might be making a video game and the events will be pressing certain buttons. And then we'll have different things happen depending on which buttons are pressed. Sometimes when the page loads, that will be another event and maybe we want to play a song or something like that. So a large part of what we're going to be doing with JavaScript is responding to the user by listening for events and then creating a recipe, a series of functions that trigger when that event happens. Please add functionality for your last 2 buttons, or all of your buttons if you have more than 2. All right, so I think that hopefully your robot responder is completely functional at this point using alerts. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys do. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon.